According to the Swiss Chemicals Ordinance, an obligation for registration is in place for dangerous preparations placed on the market. This also applies to non-hazardous preparations if certain hazardous ingredients reach or exceed the specified limit values. This registration has to be done within 3 months of first market placement in Switzerland by any commercially active manufacturer or importer with a place of residence or business in Switzerland. In this video, we will use the official abbreviation for the Federal Office of Public Health, which is FOPH. Since most of our customers will handle their notifications in German, French, or Italian, they will be used to know this organization under the following names. In German it is the BAG, the Bundesamt für Gesundheit. In French it is the OFSP, the Office Fédéral de la Santé Publique, and in Italian it is the UFSP, the Ufficio Federale della Sanità Pubblica.
Initially, we will show how easy it is to make an FOPH single or mass registration with ChemGes. Some basic requirements must be met, but this necessary preliminary work will be explained in detail later. Start this procedure from any preparation in the country-specific classification screen by clicking on the FOPH registration button. If the FOPH registration dossier has already been generated, the corresponding submission status is displayed on this button. In the information window, you will then see the chemical product identification, further referred to as CIPD, the submission status, and various substance-specific data. Substance-specific data are calculated automatically by the system. Alterations are seldom and only in occasional cases necessary. CPID and submission status are automatically transmitted and the transmission protocols are imported. However, if you have already registered preparations manually in the past, you can enter the CPID you have received for these registrations. To generate a registration for this preparation, click on the button, Registration of this substance. Confirm the creation with F10 and it will be generated in a fraction of a second. If you have not explicitly switched off these options, both the File Explorer with the already marked registration file as well as the FOPH's product register for chemicals will be opened. If necessary, then you have to log in onto the FOPH's website first. Select Mass Registration and move the generated file to the Upload button. Then click on Upload to transfer the file to the FOPH server. After uploading, the FOPH website displays the number of registration dossiers transferred. Please note that it is necessary to download the last log. Do not overlook that. Without this information, ChemGes cannot know the status of the transferred substances. An automatic transfer via S2S for the registration itself as well as for retrieving the transmission status, as you may be used to from the PCN registration, is currently not provided for by the FOPH. The last step is to transfer the generated log file. To do this, select the desired option, select the file or the directory with the log files, and the transfer is carried out. As this is quite fast, it is recommended to always transfer the contents of the entire directory so that no log is overlooked. For your information, there is also an overview of the already transferred logs.
The FOPH requires the registration of own raw materials. This is contrary to all other notification types available in ChemGes, for example the PCN registration to ECHR. The registration of raw materials is similar to that already shown for preparations. Please note that generally no raw materials with CAS numbers or EC numbers have to be reported, as the FOPH keeps a comprehensive list of existing raw materials with CAS or EC numbers. You, therefore, only need to register raw materials without one of these numbers or raw materials for which the FOPH's log states that they are unknown.
The CPID serves as information for ChemGes on whether a registration has already been submitted for a substance. Therefore, you should only change or delete it in exceptional cases. The FOPH recognizes when the product code and the CPID no longer match and only allows new registrations once this conflict is corrected. The program knows when a new registration is necessary and displays the applicable information on the screen. You can decide whether you want to register by clicking on the corresponding button. If a registration is not possible due to errors, the program recognizes this in most cases in advance and displays a corresponding notification on the screen. Some errors can only be detected by the FOPH. These errors will be displayed in the error description in the submission status. The FOPH does not distinguish between a warning and a real error, but as long as the product status is not empty or does not contain the word failed, the registration has gone through. You do not have to worry that mistakes will occur frequently, quite the opposite. Errors are rather rare and in most cases easily corrected. Substance data usually do not have to be changed, as the program can determine them automatically. Since the state of aggregation can be determined from the substance, it is almost always not necessary to enter it. As everywhere else in ChemGuess, there are overview screens for all fields in which a selection is possible. From there, one can conveniently select which value is to be used. For preparations that are hazardous to the environment, the quantity placed on the market must be reported. You can set a default value, but you may have to change it for individual products. For biocides, it is mandatory to define one or more fields of application, methods of use, and intended uses. In this case, it is not possible to successfully transmit a registration without making the necessary entries. To avoid having to enter this information for all your biocides, you can set default values that you will only have to change for your exceptions. For raw materials, the type of use within the formulation can also be specified. If no value is given there, ChemGuess automatically determines whether it is a main or secondary substance, a coloring agent or a fragrance. Since this example shows a biocide, the input is restricted because ChemGuess knows that it has to declare a biocide in this case. The FOPH requires that the manufacturers be declared for each biocidal ingredient. Up to 5 manufacturers can be selected from the overview. This overview is the same as that in the maintenance of UFI codes. If necessary, new companies can also be created from this overview. Note that this raw material information must always be entered where necessary, even if the raw material itself does not need to be reported. In this context, it should be mentioned that the manufacturer must also be indicated for the entire preparation in the case of biocidal preparations. In this case, the company listed in the UFI information is given priority. If no company is indicated there, the company information from the SDS is used.
Variants maintain a rather subordinate existence with regard to FOPH registration. As it is currently not possible to report additional descriptions or product codes for a preparation, variants are reported as additional preparations. In principle, the same registration is made as for the main preparation and only the product code, descriptions and UFIS are exchanged. If the variants have the same UFIS, you will receive a warning from the FOPH, which you should ignore. In the FOPH registration of the respective variant, there is a comment with a corresponding note for the FOPH officers.
Obviously, in order to be able to send FOPH registrations successfully, and with as little effort as possible, a few prerequisites must be fulfilled. We will show you step by step what is necessary. If you do not yet have an account with the FOPH, you must create one. Since the corresponding web pages are not easily to find, you can access them directly from ChemGuess. To find the corresponding buttons, go to the FOPH data entry window of a preparation or raw material. However, you can also find them in the data outputs. To create an account, you need to go to the product register login. Click on Login. On CH Login, on Create Account, fill in the registration information and submit the form. You will then receive an email with a confirmation code. A few days later, you will receive further information from the FOPH on how to complete the account. There is also a good PDF document that explains in detail the individual steps to create an account. You can download it from the Notification Authority for Chemicals. To do this, scroll down the web page until you reach the option E-Application for Chemicals, select this option, then User Accounts and then click on the desired menu items.
If you have already registered products with the FOPH, then it is possible to download them from there and import them into ChemGuess. To do this, go into your FOPH account and click on Search. Click on the tab Downloads and there on the button, List of all notified products of your own company. The Excel file with your substances will then be created. Please note that the headings of the created Excel file are in German. The next step is to click in ChemGuess on Import of Registered Products, select the downloaded file and the data will be imported. The prerequisite for this is that your own product code was used in the original registration and that this product code matches the product code entered in ChemGuess. Alternatively, if you have already made a mass registration with other software, you can import the logs into ChemGuess. If they are no longer available on your system, go to your FOPH account and there to Mass Registration. Click on the History tab and then on one of the displayed IDs. The log of the ID you have selected will be downloaded immediately. Unfortunately, you cannot select several IDs at the same time, so if you have done several registrations, you will have to download each of the logs individually. Afterwards, as shown earlier in this video, select Import of Registered Products. The advantage of this method is that the entire transaction information can also be transmitted. Of course, the restriction already mentioned above also applies. The product codes used in the registration must match the product codes available in ChemGuess, otherwise no allocation can be made. It is extremely important to ensure that the FOPH has knowledge of all the raw materials you use in order to guarantee a smooth mass registration process. For this purpose, we have developed the program option Mass Registration of Raw Materials. ChemGuess searches all formulations for raw materials that cannot be identified by CAS or EC number. In addition, all logs are scanned for error messages where the FOPH had no knowledge of these official numbers. All these substances are subsequently submitted to the FOPH by means of a mass registration. At the same time, a log is created which will also show if individual substances could not be reported due to errors. If, during a mass registration of preparations, error messages occur that CAS or EC numbers were not found, then simply run this part of the program again, as in this case this information is available in the log files, and ChemGuess is able to find it there. Note that if you have already registered raw materials, the assigned CPIDs must be entered for these raw materials, otherwise conflicts would occur. It is therefore important to transfer the previously registered raw materials beforehand. In order to ensure that registrations can be made for otherwise incomplete preparations, default values should be defined as far as possible. When a new registration record is created, this record will be pre-filled with this information. If you place preparations with environmental hazards on the market, then the most important default value is the annual quantity placed on the market. The information about the contact person is optional, but explicitly encouraged. The defaults for biocides do not need to be completed if you do not sell biocidal products. For aerosols, the type of packaging cannot be determined from the data already available in ChemGuess. Since one of these two types of packaging must be selected in the FOPH registration, you can specify here how your aerosols are usually sold. According to the regulation, all hazardous ingredients in products for the public must be declared without exception. Non-hazardous ingredients have to be shown from 1%. At your own risk, you can set a limit for the hazardous ingredients too. However, special limits that are lower than the specified limit take precedence. Many of our customers do not specify water in their formulations, as it is not important for the classification. As in the case of the PCN registration, you can therefore specify here that in the case of incomplete formulations, the remainder to 100% is always assumed to be water. According to the FOPH guidance, which is unfortunately not available in English, it is expressly desired that all ingredients be stated precisely. However, as this is not a mandatory requirement of the regulation, you can decide whether exact values, the rounding table for the PCN registration or the rounding table specified when preparing a Swiss SDS are to be used. This does not mean, however, that only the substances in the SDS or in the PCN registration would be reported. All substances will still be reported, just rounded according to the settings. If the product is not intended for public use, then only substances and percentages from the SDS are reported. If no official product category has been selected in the SDS, then you can specify a default value for the intended use of this substance. The last option is to specify whether the transfer logs from the FOPH are to be moved to a backup directory after the import.
Now it is possible to make an FOPH mass registration for your preparations. After calling up this function, a window appears in which you can select the preparations for output using the usual criteria. You can also determine the location for the report and the log. Then click on Program Start or F10 to start the creation of the registration dossier. As shown at the beginning of the video, move the generated file to the FOPH website. When the upload is finished, start the download of the log. Finally, we will show you a simple flowchart with the individual steps that need to be executed. These are the individual steps: start the mass registration, upload to the FOPH website, download the log from the website, import the log into ChemGuess. If errors occur, correct them and start the process again.